Let's see, also welcoming Stephanie and Florence. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This will be a recorded one, so even if we are a bit, few minutes in, and maybe some people will still need a minute or two to be able to join from other calls or their own schedules, I think we can start going. This will be a recorded session, and I think it will be also publicly posted after that on our playlist on YouTube. As a reminder, our sessions on that we call Lunch and Learns, it's most of the time around 1 hour, where we tackle a topic that is related to the domain we are working. It could be tech, it could be something financial, it could be literally tools that help our lives. We are having a few one these days, more crowded because of the tools we use, or our here partners that have insightful things to share with us, especially that we move at the speed, pretty high speed, let's call it. And one of the things that most of the time we get to ask, whether we present monetization or we talk about open payments or even any other part of the values that we have, like inclusion and openness, most of the time some people get blocked, but the questions are also around why it takes so long, why you need this, why you need that, who is using this, how is using, what's behind that. And pretty happy that Chimoney took the challenge on to explain and make a presentation. Maybe we can add in the page that is now linked in the chat also their article that we published together a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, where they also entitled how they support the Interledger integration within their system. But without further ado, I'm not sure who from Chimoney, Uchi, you're starting, or yeah, let's have it a roll.
Awesome, yeah, thank you so much. Hi everyone. Everyone is doing well. I see it's a friendly bunch on the call, and really good to be here to share what we're doing from a compliance perspective. So I'm going to keep it pretty casual, although I have a slide. So I'm going to try to keep it pretty informal. So feel free to maybe raise your hands at any point if you have any questions for me. And at the end, we're going to answer all of the questions that were asked last time. So last time, I believe, yeah, Vinil, thanks for sending over the questions. We have answers to all of them. We're going to discuss them at the end. So I'm going to share my screen right now, so we jump right into it. Okay, awesome. So compliance at Chimoney, and how does it work? So how is Chimoney able to integrate Interledger and issue wallets to users, and why is this important? Why is compliance important? So as part of this, as part of today's discussion, we're going to basically see a deep dive into Chimoney's compliance process, how we do KYC, AML, and other activities. We're going to talk about what those acronyms mean in a bit for those who are new. But for us, compliance is important because it helps us to provide a better experience for our users. So from a security perspective and also from a privacy perspective, compliance is not just a thing that we have to do. It's something that we're happy to do. And yeah, so it protects our users, it protects the funds that they hold with Chimoney, and also it protects our corporate clients. And yeah, as I mentioned this already, compliance helps us to comply with legal obligations. It helps us to increase trust between users and Chimoney, especially for the corporate clients that we work with and those that use our API. The trust and credibility is super important there. And then finally, for the partners that we use to deliver payments to the last mile, also that compliance is important for both Chimoney and also the client. On both ways, we want to make sure that Chimoney has tools and processes in place to protect user and client funds. So today's session is going to have a few components. The first one, we're going to talk about what Chimoney has been able to achieve and Chimoney's compliance framework. We talk about our KYC and AML framework, and then we will then go through how we onboard businesses, and finally we'll conclude with a Q&A. So for regulatory milestones, Chimoney is a money services business, and we're licensed or registered with FinTrack, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center of Canada, to operate as a money services business. And we are able to do 4 key activities. When we were registering with FinTrack, we decided to register to do the 4 key activities that FinTrack supports. Some organizations only are able to do one, but Chimoney is registered to do the 4 key activities, including dealing in virtual currencies and things like that. Finally, last year, the Bank of Canada introduced a requirement for payment services providers to register under the Retail Payments Activities Act. So Chimoney is part of the first group that is registered with the Bank of Canada under these new regulations. So we've been following the regulation and also have been able to contribute with the refinement and improvement of the regulation even before it was announced and it became a thing. So moving on to benefits of compliance. Tilly, please.
Hi, Uchi. I'm sorry because I feel like I'm interjecting. Would you like for us to hold off on questions to the end? I have a question on the previous slide, and I didn't want you to move too far ahead before I ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Thank you. It's kind of in the weeds, but I was just curious what being registered as an MSB only would have gotten versus being registered as an MSB and a PSP in Canada. So I'm just trying to understand like what the composite effect of having each of these licenses allows Chimoney to be able to do. I'm happy for you to answer right at the end. I just wanted to note that. Thanks.
Yeah, I can answer it quickly. So being registered with FinTrack as an MSB allowed Chimoney to hold clients' funds, to deal in foreign currency, to do cross-border payments, and I think one more thing. However, the PSP regulation or the RPPAA regulation, which came in effect last year, there was a way for the Canadian financial system to give payment services provider more access to banking tools and also access to data. So previously, even if a company or an organization was an MSB, they were not able to access certain parts or certain services that licensed banks can access. But the new regulation for registered companies to be able to access some additional tools, data, and also payment trails within Canada. So I think that's like a big lift in terms of what Chimoney will be able to do, right? Technically, a company can be just an MSB. However, the Bank of Canada encourages most MSBs to register as PSPs, and in some cases, it's kind of there's a duplicate of what these licenses mean. Well, I guess the summary of it is that being a PSP unlocks more opportunities for payment companies to launch new business models or access more data from the Canadian systems. I don't know if that answers your questions, Billy.
It does. Thank you. Thank you. It does.
Uchi, there is another question in the chat.
Okay.
Again, tell us, do you want us to capture all the questions and at the end to ask them, or?
Yeah, let's capture it at the end and then ask it. I think that
Okay,
might
I'll
be...
add it, Stephanie, to the list. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so moving on to the benefits of compliance at Chimoney. I mean, we talked about this earlier, but the key is that we're able to provide better services to our users, and they can trust that their funds are secure, their data is secure, and also that their funds are protected, right? So that's what compliance does for us. So moving on to a core component of compliance, which, I mean, when we think of compliance, most people first think KYC or know your customer. So KYC, as most of us know, is a way for companies to know the individuals they are dealing with and to protect and prevent things like fraud, money laundering, and financial crimes, right? So KYC helps us to know the users that we're working with, why they want to use Chimoney, and where the funds they are processing, where the funds they are processing in Chimoney comes from and where it's going. So it has a couple of components. And yeah, so these are the benefits. It builds trust between regulators. It also builds trust between the partners that we work with. And for every user that we onboard, we know them a lot. So from their name, address, and many other information. And the process that we use to do that is we do ID verification. And I think that's the bare minimum. However, we go further and do a liveliness check via video. We also cross-check their documents against the sanctioned list. We also, in some cases, depending on where the user is from, depending on the risk profile of the country, we do enhanced due diligence, which involves things like verifying their information online and things like that. Across everything that we do in KYC, there are multiple steps, but two key steps. The first step is collecting all of this information, the ID information, the liveliness check. And then once that is collected, we use AI to verify that those information are valid. We also check sanctioned and other lists for those information. And once that is passed, we then move on to a manual process. So every user that is onboarded on Chimoney is reviewed manually by a compliance team. And for each review, we review their ID information, the liveliness check that they did, and a few other details before they get approved to be onboarded in as Chimoney users. And also for each users, they are classified according to their risk profile. And this risk profile unlocks features and services for them. So for example, the transaction limit that a user can perform weekly is determined by their risk profile, which is set at time of review of their KYC information. But the goal ultimately is to provide the best experience for users. We want users that use Chimoney to feel safe. We want their funds to be safe. We also want to ensure that the funds that are moved through the Chimoney rails can be accounted for. So at every point in time, all transactions at Chimoney were able to say that this transaction was funded by a payment that came from a bank in country Y or a mobile money wallet in country Z, and it's going to country A or B for this purpose. So at every point in time at Chimoney, we're able to provide that information for all transactions. And yeah, not really going to go into much details about how all of this works, but if you have questions about specifically how the system was built and how we can share ideas on this, please feel free to message me or ask in the chat. I'll answer at the end. So, but collecting all of this information comes with a lot of responsibility, right? On Chimoney, right? We're collecting personal information, address information, and things like that. So the approach we've taken at Chimoney is that information that Chimoney collects, we only collect information that is needed for the purpose that is needed for. So we don't collect extra information that we don't need, and information is always encrypted at rest and also in transmission. And in other cases, we use KYC systems that are been tested and battle tested for these purposes. So what this does is that it protects Chimoney from a liability perspective, and also it also protects the user information. Okay, so I'm not really going to go into like the framework because I talked about it earlier. But beyond KYC, beyond knowing a user, there's also like the AML and the counterterrorism financing policy. So AML is anti-money laundering. So anti-money laundering procedure helps us to detect and prevent and also report financial crimes. In most cases, I think we tend to be more proactive about this because I mean the team is highly experienced, not just from a North American perspective, but from the perspective of other countries who has like different like financial risk profile. So we are able to bring all of this experience to build an anti-money laundering policy that ensures that we're able to detect and prevent money laundering even before it happens. And then for counterterrorism financing, right, we also are proactive about it. And one way we do that is by checking for politically exposed individuals. We check a sanction list before we onboard users. I mean, there are a couple of details in how all of this works, but I think this session is probably not enough to kind of discuss all of this in details. Okay, so how we enforce KYC and AML at Chimoney. So I already mentioned this. We screen users against global sanction lists. We have a regular employee training to ensure that all team members are aware of the importance of compliance. And also the real-time transaction monitoring system that we've built, which I mean, I personally was involved in developing this system from an engineering perspective. It's something that we're very proud of, right? Because it combines AI and also it combines a few criteria to detect and stop fraudulent transactions in real time. So this is something that we continuously improve and we're really proud of. Potentially, we can also offer these services to other financial services companies that might be interested in a transaction monitoring system. And for reporting, as a FinTrack licensed money services businesses, one of the obligations is to report suspicious transaction and also to report large cash transactions. So large cash transactions doesn't really apply to Chimoney because we don't accept cash for funding. However, suspicious transactions reports do apply to Chimoney, and we have a way to report that also to FinTrack. So far we've been talking about the individual side or the consumer side of things. However, Chimoney's core business is onboarding and powering other businesses to offer payment services. And to do that, we've spent a lot of time developing our KYB and business onboarding processes. So Chimoney's KYB, or Know Your Business process, it's a multi-layered approach, right? So it starts with verifying the individual that is submitting or onboarding to Chimoney, right? So we verify that individual and then we verify the corporate details. Additionally, we go further to verify the directors of the business. Also, we verify the beneficial owners, or those that own between at least 20 to 25% of the business. And also we verify the key officers of the business. So again, starting with the individual that is onboarding onto the platform, and then continuing to the corporate details, if they are public, purpose of transaction, things like that, and then going down to verify those that have significant control of the business. What this does for us is that for every business at Chimoney, we're able to say, okay, these are the business details. These are the officers that have control of this business. And we are also able to prevent users from using a corporate entity to bypass our AML policy in cases where an individual who might be politically exposed would want to use a corporation to move money. So we're able to catch those at time of onboarding also. Okay, so, and then for protecting client fund, funds are always held in trust and insured by the respective regulatory entities. So in in all cases, we do not hold client funds in Chimoney's accounts. We hold them in trust accounts and these trust accounts are insured by the respective regulatory authorities. So I'm going to stop here and we're going to move on to the Q&A session. So maybe we can start with the questions in the chat. If anyone has any questions, we can address them now and before we can kind of talk about this Q&A that came in earlier. How does that sound?
Slow button, sorry. Sounds good. Yeah, and I see there were transfers, also a few others. I think the earlier. Oh, go ahead, Stephanie. Yes.
Don't let me cut you off, Hannah. I just
no. I was just
confused.
reading your question, so go ahead, voice it out yourself. Sorry for that. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. It's very interesting. I guess one of the questions I had was, you know, Canada has 13 different provincial jurisdictions, including the territories. Do you have to check the regulatory requirements for the financial payment systems in each province? I know some of this stuff is like consumer protection tends to be provincially regulated, or is it all federal? It would be quite difficult if it was, if they were all different.
Yeah, thankfully in Canada, it's federal for money services businesses. So we don't have to like register with all provinces. So once a company, at least in Chimoney's case, that provides financial services, is registered federally, we're able to accept deposits for users across Canada. We're able to help them move those deposits globally. We're also able to unlock use cases like enabling them to trade in virtual currencies and things like that. And that is enabled by our MSB registration with FinTrack. And the RPAA regulation also unlocks additional use cases. It's still kind of evolving, but we're really excited about what the Bank of Canada's new regulation would unlock for us, especially how it enables us to get direct access to the banking APIs and infrastructure, because that is something that, I mean, as you know, the Canadian payment system or landscape has really struggled with access to basically being able to move money directly using the rails that the banks use. And that's something that we're really excited to be able to unlock with RPA. I don't know if that answers your question, Stephanie.
Well, I don't want to monopolize your time, but that's really interesting. So that's that new regulation that is enabling this to more or less be streamlined. Now, I had another question about which databases you're using to assess customer reliability or risk. In the good old days, back when I was working at the social services department, you know, they didn't let anybody check the social insurance number database. And so if somebody had a doppelganger that was using their SIN number, you were kind of stuck with two people using the same SIN number, or three, or however many times it had been duplicated for identities. How do you manage that nowadays? Do you now get access to some sort of SIN number verification system, or are you relying on the credit card system to do that?
So how we verify users today is we verify their ID and also or passport. And so that's the first step. So instead of using the same numbers and the other databases, we do ID verification, and we're able to call a third-party API to validate the ID numbers and also the details in the ID to ensure that it is valid. So that's the first step. Once we establish that,
for a driver's license, you're using their APIs to verify their numbers.
correct,
You
yeah.
don't just train your people to recognize a driver's license.
Correct,
You're
yeah.
actually getting a verification. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome, Stephanie.
Jeremiah, want to continue with your question in the chat, and after we move to the doc?
I think you're mute. You're mute. I think, or your mic is disconnected.
Yeah, I don't see it all.
No? Still not?
Oh, now, yes.
okay now.
Yes. In the meanwhile, just 1 second, Faheed added in the chat that also it's worth of note that we don't allow two users to have the same ID being used for separate accounts. So, in addition to what was already mentioned. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Let's see. Is my mic working now? Maybe?
Yes, yes, we hear.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you were using AI for determining basically anti-money laundering to be able to identify transactions. How is that, like, how are you training that machine learning model for what is or is not a problematic transaction? And then how is that presented to users if it is getting flagged? And then how do you deal with basically bad flags?
Yeah. So how we do that is we have a history of all transactions that have been performed at Chimoney. And the first step, when a user performs a transaction, we first check if that same user has performed a similar transaction in recent times, how fast they are performing the transaction. And also we do things like if a user is new and they are performing multiple transactions, then it looks fraudulent. So combining the frequency of transaction, the recency of transaction, the value of the transaction, and also the process or the method where the transaction comes from, we built a model that tells us if this transaction could potentially be fraudulent. And that's just one of the ways that we handle transaction monitoring. There are different models that we built to be able to like detect this transaction. And how it works or how we report this to the user is when a transaction is flagged as fraudulent, it's set to pending, so we don't process it. And then our team is notified about that transaction, and then we manually look at that transaction from the back end, and then we either approve it to continue or we either escalate it or stop it. And then if it is a suspicious transaction, since we're a FinTrack MSB, we also report that transaction to the regulators. So that's how we do it today. And this is like an in-house system. However, there was a company that was at the Interledger Summit. I can't remember their name right now. So they have an open source way of doing this also. However, I looked at what they built, and it was going to be like us setting up entirely different.
That's Tazama.
Yeah, Tazama, yeah. Yeah, Tazama, yeah. So we decided to build ours in-house, but I think we should probably look into that and maybe discuss with the team on how to simplify how Tazama can be deployed to like existing platforms like Chimoney.
Yeah, I'm specifically just interested because a lot of those other systems with other payment systems, you have either a lot more information available to do an analysis on a particular payment. You start looking at like packet level, payment packets, you're not getting like a full picture of the payment. And so I'm just not aware of other ML models out there right now that can deal with that. But I'm really curious to know if, maybe Tazama might be able to be adapted to do that. So.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, we'll definitely look into Tazama again. We did look into it, but I think it's promising. So chat with the team and see how we can work together.
If I can jump in, we are actually working with Tazama. The problem with that system is it's post, not pre-AML or post-fraud.
Mhm.
And so they, right now, a transaction is a transaction for them. So a 1 cent transaction takes just as much as $100 transaction. So they're working with a model to account for ideally streaming payments. They first tried to get down to the packet level,
Mhm.
and they soon realized they couldn't handle the load of packetized payments. So now they're hooking into open payments to basically be able to read the transactions. So for example, on weaponization, if I go on a website for 10 minutes, instead of processing 10 transactions, they'll process one aggregate for the 10, basically the incoming payment. When it expires, they process the incoming payment.
Oh, so they process the transaction in a batch instead of processing each packet.
Yeah. So they always do this. So they do AML after the transaction settles technically. So they can't, they can reverse the transaction, but they can't stop a transaction right now. And they're working on more real-time monitoring.
Mhm.
That's not baked yet as part of the new stack. Actually, Jana and Daniel, maybe it would be good to have Tazama do one of these lunch and learns as well. They have a very interesting system.
Yeah, great. I'd love to learn more about what they are doing too. So, if we can have lunch and learn, that would be great. I'd love to attend.
In true spirit of giving more work to Joanna, let's do that. And I was thinking the same, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So why don't we jump onto the Q&As and the slide? Okay, so the first one was just switch context. How often does Chimoney undergo compliance audit, and what measures are in place to address findings? Yeah, so I can answer this. So for compliance audit, we have an external compliance audit annually. So what this does for us is that it helps us to refine all our procedures to meet the latest regulatory needs. Additionally, what it does is it helps the external firm to look at these policies that have helped us create in the previous year. How did Chimoney implement it, like in the past 12 months, so it helps them basically help us to improve our processes. And that starts with refining our compliance program. So we do like a ground up update of our compliance program. And I mean, things that change annually are transaction limits for certain risk profile. For businesses, we have low risk, medium risk, and high risk businesses. And depending on what risk profile a business has, we set limits for how much they can process in a week, and other limits on like API endpoints they can access and things like that. So every year we work with an external firm to update our compliance program and also update how that impacts users. But we're also proactive about this, right? So from an internal perspective, we do regular assessment of our compliance processes and refine them in real time. And also our transaction monitoring system is evolving almost monthly. So we keep making improvements to the system and how it detects and prevents fraudulent transactions. So yeah, that's how that's how compliance audit works at Chimoney. The second one is how often does Chimoney stay updated with evolving regulations in Canada and internationally? So for this, and how we stay updated with evolving regulations, we are proactive about this. So we're part of Fintechs Canada and other industry bodies. And for most regulations that would come into effect, we work with the regulators to ensure that those policies are friendly to the users and also to the payment providers in Canada. So it's a proactive approach that we take. Instead of waiting for regulations to become law, we are aware of changes that are coming. And as part of the work that we do with industry organizations, we're able to provide feedback and guidance to the regulators to provide the best user experience for users. Hopefully this answers the question about how we stay updated with the evolving AML and KYC policy. Okay, so the next one was, how has the massive fine on Canadian bank like CIBC, or even the biggest one, TD Bank, Toronto Dominion Bank, influenced KYC requirements in Canada? Sorry, someone's hand is up. Go ahead, please, for answer this.
Yes, sorry, that was a mistake on my part. It wasn't poor old CIBC. It was TD that made the big, got the big fine.
Yeah, no worries, definitely. Thank you for jumping in. Yeah, so yeah, TD. Stephanie, do you want to provide context so that others would kind of know what happened?
Well, basically, the Federal Trade Commission levied a massive fine, and I can't remember, but it was in the billions against the Toronto Dominion Bank, which is one of our big five Class A banks, because for years they had been ignoring their anti-money laundering requirements, and they knew, they even had emails within the company that they were processing crooked transactions, and they didn't do anything about it. Of course, there's a lot of money involved here, and they're very competitive. This is why I'm kind of wondering how, I'm glad you're part of a fintechs association, because the Canadian Bankers Association used to try rather hard to keep that to be a closed club. So getting what is basically competitive risk information, that's a challenge, I would think. And I'm wondering how this situation is evolving. If I were the regulator, I would be imposing requirements on everybody to share information and play nice after that Toronto Dominion. I mean, it's very embarrassing. We're kind of proud of our banking system in Canada. We don't like to be shown up by an American regulator because the American system is a lot slacker than the Canadian one. So I won't go on and on and on, but I am wondering about how much cooperation, how much input you're getting from the staff at the finance department, for instance, or at the FinTrack folks on how to do this. I mean, it's a big, complex system.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, thanks for that context. I think that's super useful and helpful. Yeah, so the fine has really, I think it's changed a lot. So the banks have become even stricter, right? As you mentioned, the banking system in Canada is more strict. And sometimes as a fintech, it feels like it's harder to innovate. It's harder to get access to like the services that we need to offer the best experience to users, and even the transactions sometimes can be slower to process just because of the strict regulations. However, with the fine that's been imposed on TD, our experience has been that it's even more stricter, whereby some banks who offered bank accounts to MSBs have shut that down, right? So as an MSB in Canada, it's virtually, it's not impossible, but it's hard to get a bank account, even an operating account with one of the big banks. right? And that has become even more hard now. So yeah, but what we've done in FinTech Canada is we have as part of the industry engagement that is done, folks from Bank of Canada and the other regulatory agencies like Payments Canada come to speak at the FinTech Canada like weekly, monthly calls, which I mean is helpful to help us to know what's going on. And also, we're actually speaking at the Payments Canada Summit alongside the Interledger team in May. So really excited that the Interledger team and Julia invited us to that. So that's that will be part of the engagement that we would do to basically help make Interledger a thing in Canada. So we're really excited for that. But I guess the short answer is that because of the fine that was levied on TD, it's become even more challenging for payment companies to do business, especially with getting access to bank accounts. However, the RPA has the potential to change that, since we will likely be getting access to like the same areas that the banks have, and that would unlock so much opportunities for us to provide better services to users. So moving on, Stephen, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Very
Okay.
helpful. I mean, I could go on and on. I'd
Yeah.
like to go to that meeting in May. It would be interesting to see what the landscape is like and what kind of advice you're getting from the central agencies.
Yeah, 100%. So it's at the Payments Canada Summit in Toronto. So we have a panel with Julia, Brianna, the CEO of Interledger, and I believe one of the other companies in the Interledger community. So I think it will be a good way for us to kind of share the work we're doing with Interledger, and also how, so it's focused on cross-border payment, but I think it's a good place for us to be at, because most of the regulators will be there at that summit.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so next one, what jurisdictions do you take notice of in your compliance policy, and how do they differ? Yeah, so in terms of jurisdiction, Chimoney is primarily a Canadian MSB. For other jurisdictions that we operate, we might have entities, and these entities are tech companies, and those entities would partner with the businesses, the other licensed entities in those jurisdictions, because what this does for us is that it keeps our regulatory burden minimal, while also helping us to expand to more jurisdictions using partners. So primarily, we stay on top of the regulatory landscape in Canada, and also we lean on partners, trusted partners for other jurisdictions that we are expanding to and processing funds to. And in terms of KYC and AML and how we verify information for users that are outside Canada, depending on the country, we're able to onboard users without needing to have physical presence in those countries, either through partners or through the existing KYC and AML framework that we have. But in all, the approach we're taking is we want to keep our compliance burden lean in Canada, while also expanding to other jurisdictions through partnerships with licensed entities, using a tech subsidiary of Chimoney in those jurisdictions. So that's how we do it. So moving on to next one. Just a moment. So have you ever had any interaction with the Privacy Commission of Data Protection or the Data Protection Authorities in any of the jurisdictions you operate in? So at the moment, no, we've not. had any interaction with the privacy commissioners in the jurisdictions that we operate in, but that's something that we're going to discuss with the auditors in our next compliance audit, which is coming up in next few months, actually next 2 months. So we're going to have a discussion with them to see if it's something that we should be doing, and if our compliance program is sufficient enough, or we can maybe improve our compliance program by interfacing with the regulators from a privacy and data protection perspective. So those are all the questions that we received before the session. But let me pause there. We have about 10 minutes. Let me pause there for a bit for additional questions. Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie, please.
Yeah, and sorry, just tell me to be quiet if I'm monopolizing the conversation here. In theory, at least, any of these regulatory improvements that are being made by FINTRAC, because FINTRAC's a government agency, they should have undergone a privacy impact assessment, which they would have had to submit to the privacy commissioner for review. So if I were still in the privacy commissioner's office, I'd be dead curious about what's going on in the payments industry, because you're not going to get that from the banks or anybody else explaining to you what's going on. In other words, they have a need to understand this so that they can protect privacy of individuals. If you scan the existing payment system, I dare you to show me a decent page that explains how know your customer requirements work. You know, there's a lot of personal information being accessed, shared, stockpiled in different databases, and so on. And you need it. I'm not arguing about the justification for it, but there's a transparency requirement that isn't being met. So, I mean, I'm tempted to fire an access to information request in to see if they've got a privacy impact assessment from these guys. But through your contacts, I'm wondering if anybody's heard of one, or because that would be then, you know, the logical thing would be if they produce a privacy impact assessment for the privacy commissioner, then that information should be aware and made available in rough, of course, not their specific risk, but basically the framework. I'm trying to get a framework, and there's so little available.
Yeah.
So, seen something through your association, I'd love to see it. This is
That's a good point, actually, because I've not seen any too. So I would love to. Yeah, I would sync with when we have a call with FinTech Canada. I would ask to see if that's something that we might be able to also invite someone from the Privacy Commissioner's office to maybe share what privacy means and how it impacts fintechs, since we're, like you rightly mentioned, assessing lots of personal information about users and using that to process payments on their behalf on a daily basis. Yeah, great feedback, Stephanie, and insights.
Right. In the meantime, I'll see if I can worm something out of my contacts in the Privacy Commissioner's office, see what they know.
Please, thank you so much. Awesome. So I think that's everything that we had. So we have a list of resources here that everyone can access. We're going to share these slides in the meeting notes for today for everyone to review and assess. Yeah, thanks everyone for all of the questions that you asked. I think this was super useful for us, especially with helping us to basically go back and review our entire compliance program, and also have the team work together to prepare this session. So thanks to the team, Hamed, Faheed, Phylis, also Head of Finance, Adela, for the amazing work that you did in preparing this session and digging through all of the compliance requirements and the program that the auditors worked on a few months ago. Thanks all.
Thank you so much, Uchi. Thanks so much to the whole team at Chimoney, and very happy to have you today in our lunch and learn. Definitely a series that will continue on explaining more around. If there is any other questions or discussion around this, I think you find almost the whole team of Chimoney around in our community Slack. If there are more questions to add in the doc, in agenda or details, resources, anything that helps everyone, feel free to share it in the doc, and we will probably, if we see something new, we'll probably post in the Slack to as an update for that. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. We do have, as I mentioned at the beginning, feedback form for those that attended. I hope Finial has it at hand to paste it. It's almost Friday here afternoon. My English is losing me. I'm kidding. I spend my whole life in English, so don't worry. Please do spend a second or two to just reply and tell us how the session was, and especially what else should be tackled in such lunch and learn sessions in the next one. We do have a schedule till May, early June. So we're looking forward to continue the series, and don't stop there. Thanks again to the whole Chimoney team. Have a great afternoon and day for those rising now.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.